From Hollywood to the media and now the halls of Congress, sexual harassment is front and center as a political issue. First, there were the allegations facing Alabama Senate candidate Judge Roy Moore, and now claims against Senator Al Franken from his time as a comedian in 2006. We'll discuss the charges and whether Congress will finally crack down on itself. Up next, we'll bring in our Sunday group to discuss the Moore and Franken scandals, as well as new questions about whether Bill Clinton should have resigned over the Lewinsky affair.
I'm the only one that can unite Democrats and Republicans. Because I seem to be opposed by both.
Before I even knew it, he put his hand on the back of my head and came towards me and mashed his face against my mouth and stuck his tongue in my mouth.
Alabama Senate candidate Roy Moore trying to save his campaign while broadcaster Leanne Tweeden makes allegations against Democratic Senator Al Franken. And it's time now for our Sunday group, former Republican Congressman Jason Chaffetz, columnist for The Hill, Juan Williams, head director of research at BÓMBŠHL, Jessica Tarlov, and Jason Riley from the Wall Street Journal. Well, Congressman, what are your thoughts about the problems with sexual harassment in general, on Capitol Hill in particular? And I got to say, as I started this week, I am shocked at the rules that members of Congress, as you used to be, have implemented to protect yourselves from sexual harassment charges.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely disgusting. There's always somebody doing something stupid somewhere, but a woman should not have to go through that process as you laid out when it happens in Congress. And maybe the best avenue is just go directly to the police, because there is a legal process by getting prosecutors and the law involved, and I think the victims ought to have the loudest voice on that. But politically, I do believe that those decisions need to be made by the people in, say, Alabama and Minnesota. I think it's very presumptuous for the majority leader to say, hey, we're going to work to kick you out, when you're dealing with the same fact pattern. The people in Alabama and Minnesota can make those decisions.
Well, Jessica, let me ask you about that. Should this just be left in the case particularly of Alabama, because Judge Moore faces a special election in a couple of weeks? Leave it to them?
Well, I think obviously upholding our democracy is the most important issue at play here, but I do think, especially considering what's gone on in the last couple of years with the allegations in the political world, in the media and entertainment world, and what an important topic sexual harassment is for America generally, that people like Mitch McConnell, people like Cory Gardner need to stand up and take a stand on something like this and to say this is unacceptable behavior and we don't want it here with us, there's no place for it in Washington. So I'm torn about it. Obviously, the voters will get their chance to vote for Roy Moore if they want. But there should be a candidate on the ballot on the Republican side who has not been accused of child molestation.
Let me ask you, because this is obviously a difficult conversation, but it's an important conversation. On the other hand, I wonder to some degree, are we mixing up misdemeanors and felonies? You've got the case of Al Franken, who allegedly forcibly kissed this woman and groped her, which is clearly piggish behavior. On the other hand, it's different from the allegations against Roy Moore, who, as you pointed out, allegedly was having sexual contact with a 14-year-old girl. Should they all be career enders?
I don't think so personally, and I think that having that nuanced discussion is what we really need to do at this point. There was a very good piece that came out in the New York Post about this that said, Harvey Weinstein's picture should not be next to Al Franken's picture. Roy Moore's picture should not be next to the guy from Amazon, for instance. The strength.
But you've got to know, some people are going to say, well, maybe you're protecting.
I'm not. It's not because of political affiliation. I know that we will get to talking about the importance of revisiting Bill Clinton and what happened in the 90s, and Democrats are certainly taking that up right now. But we need to be clear about the strength of these allegations and how important they are, and what Roy Moore did versus what an Al Franken did.
Well, let's talk about Bill Clinton, because that was a really interesting development this week, the reassessment of Bill Clinton's affair with Monica Lewinsky back when Clinton was president. Kirsten Gillibrand, who is the senator from New York, who sits in Hillary Clinton's seat, says that under current standards, Bill Clinton should have resigned. Mrs. Clinton says no. Take a look.
Yes, I think that is the appropriate response, but I think things have changed today, and I think under those circumstances, there should be a very different reaction.
This was a painful time, not only in our marriage, but in our country, as I've written about. But it was investigated fully. It was addressed at the time.
Jason, pretty interesting that Kirsten Gillibrand, who is thinking of running for president on the Democratic side in 2020, went there.
Well, this is pure political expediency. This is not about principle. This is clear. It seems to me that if you are a pro-choice wealth redistributionist, you can also be a groper and get a pass from both of the women you played clips from. Hillary Clinton is also partially defending Al Franken because of how he's responded to the charges against him versus how President Trump has responded. And then you have the senator from New York essentially saying, you know, that now we live in different times. Well, this is a woman who has associated herself with the Clinton family, with Mrs. Clinton in particular, has that seat Mrs. Clinton once held. And I just think that this is not about principle at all. This is just about taking advantage of the current opportunity.
What do you think the political expediency is in Kirsten Gillibrand going after Bill Clinton now?
It's now fashionable. It's now acceptable. And she pays no political cost for doing so.
Well, she pays a little bit of political cost, and let me bring this up with you, Juan. Philippe Reines, a longtime aide to Hillary Clinton, blasted Gillibrand for what she said. He tweeted this. Let's put it up. Over 20 years, you, Gillibrand, took Clinton's endorsements, money, and seat. Hypocrite. Interesting strategy for 2020 primaries. Best of luck. This issue of sex harassment is not only splitting Republicans, Roy Moore and Mitch McConnell, it's also splitting Democrats.
Right, and the power here is the charge of hypocrisy. And I think that's why Bill Clinton comes to the fore so quickly, because the charge would be, oh, Democrats, have you been as tough on your sexual harassers as you're asking Republicans to be on theirs? And so immediately you've seen pieces in Vox, the New York Times, Gillibrand coming forward. There's a Democratic congressman who said, oh, yeah, Clinton should have been ousted. I think one of the keys for me is Democrats wanting to say that we retain some moral authority in speaking on this issue, as Republicans try to impose what I think at times, as you and Jessica Tarlov were discussing, a false equivalency between, let's say, a Roy Moore and even a Bill Clinton. I just think that, you know, at the moment, the politics is so tribal.
I can understand the difference or the distinction between Moore and Franken. How is there a distinction between Moore and...
I don't think, even if you wanted to say Monica Lewinsky was an intern, a young person, and there was a huge power differential between the President of the United States and an intern, no one was suggesting that she was beneath the age of consent. And she said, well, I'm just saying in that the one that he was impeached for, because he was impeached.
Well, he was impeached for lying.
Well, he was impeached over this case, lying about this issue. And I think that it's very important for people. Part of the Reines response was millions of dollars were spent investigating and impeaching this man. And now you have a situation here where there's some people, including Roy Moore, who want to point at Mitch McConnell and claim there's a Republican conspiracy, much less Democrats or the elite media from Washington trying to tell the voters of Alabama what to do.
The Bill Clinton situation happened while he was in office and then lied about it as the President of the United States. That's why it has such... But I do think, Kristen, I mean, I'm glad that we're elevating the debate. I'm glad that this is becoming totally unacceptable on both sides of the aisle. Right. And there should be a huge and massive political price, if not essentially the death penalty for people who engage in this, and that they cannot serve at the highest levels of government. Why do we, I wish we put up with these people.
About the death penalty.
Yeah. Well, a political death penalty is why should they serve? Some of them, you know, yeah. But no, the political death penalty, which is why should we put up with anybody serving at the highest levels of government who engages in this, whether it was 40 years ago or whether it happened while you were in office.
Thank you all. This is going to be continued, no question about it. You're going to take a break here, and we'll see you a little bit later. Up next, joining me now from Salt Lake City, Utah, Republican Congresswoman Mia Love. Congresswoman, I want to start with a comment this week by one of your colleagues in the House, Congresswoman Barbara Comstock. Here she is.
The young staffer, as a young woman, went there and was greeted with a member in a towel. It was a male, who then invited her in. At that point, he decided to expose himself. She left, and then she quit her job.
Congresswoman, how serious a problem is there with sexual harassment in Congress? And if you can tell us, have you or any of your staffers been a victim?
Well, I can tell you this has been going on for a very long time, and I'm glad that people are speaking out about it. It's important to speak out about it nationally and also locally and in our homes. I have 2 girls that I'm raising, one going off to college, and it's important that we're comfortable having uncomfortable conversations so that we can protect our young women and protect women in the workspace.
Let's talk about your workspace, because it turns out that Congress has protected itself with a much more challenging, much more cumbersome process than we see in the private sector. I want to put this up. I think people will be surprised. A victim who claims sexual harassment in Congress must wait 3 months to file a complaint. First, submit to 30 days of counseling and another 30 days of mediation, then wait another 30 days to seek a hearing. And Congresswoman, it gets even worse than that, because if there is a settlement, it's paid for by taxpayers, not by the individual member of Congress. Is this another case of the old boys clubbing network on Capitol Hill protecting itself?
Well, as the only woman in the Utah delegation, I have a little bit of a problem with that. Our office has made sure that they have taken all of the anti-sexual harassment training, and I led out on that, taking it myself. I think we need some leadership. We need people that are out there that are talking about this and talking about how situations like this, behavior like this, is absolutely inappropriate. But I'd also like to say one more thing. I think it's important that we, especially the things that are going on out there, that this is not being politicized, it's not being used for personal gain, because we normalize the situation if and when that happens. We have to make sure that we're not going out there doing anything that is going to further victimize people who have actually been hurt and who've been humiliated by sexual harassment and sexual misconduct.
Well, let me ask you about 2 specific cases. Do you believe that Judge Roy Moore, the candidate in the special Senate election in Alabama, should step aside from that race to let a write-in candidate try to hold the seat for Republicans? And what do you think should happen to Senator Al Franken after the allegations against him this week?
I'm calling them all on the carpet. I think that all of them should take responsibility for their behavior. This is, when you think about Al Franken, you think about Judge Moore, you think about all of these situations that are out there, they're all different, and they all deserve due process, and the people need to be able to have time to talk about it and process it. We certainly aren't going to be able to do that today in 7 minutes on a Sunday show, but I think it's important that we end up talking about it, getting comfortable, having uncomfortable conversations, and saying that this type of behavior is unacceptable.
Well, let me ask you about one other person and whether or not he should be held accountable, and that is President Trump, who has had very little to say about the Judge Roy Moore case, but when it comes to Al Franken and that picture, he weighed in on that, the picture of Franken appearing to grope his accuser. The president sent out this tweet: "The Al Frankenstein picture is really bad, speaks 1,000 words. Where do his hands go in pictures 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 while she sleeps?" On the other hand, when reporters noted that President Trump faces his own allegations from a bunch of women about him allegedly groping them, here's what a spokeswoman said.
I think in one case specifically, Senator Franken has admitted wrongdoing and the president hasn't. I think that's a very clear distinction.
Congresswoman, does that satisfy you, the fact that President Trump has denied the allegations?
Well, again, all of these situations are completely different. I think people need to take responsibility for their actions, not just in the future, but also in the past. And we can't, it's absolutely, I'm not qualified, nor is it appropriate for us to process, prosecute, judge, and sentence in the 7 minutes that we have here. But I think it is important that we all speak out and we prevent these things from happening. This is about looking towards the future and making sure that women are empowered and no longer victimized, that people, if they are experiencing situations in the office that makes them uncomfortable, that they feel empowered, that they can actually speak out and stop the behavior.
Congresswoman Love, thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.